Welcome. We're just about ready to open the room and start our presentation tonight. Why don't you send me a hello or I'm here if you're joining us tonight for the PCOS presentation, please. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to ask whether or not you can hear and see the presentation okay. And if you could, just drop a little chat in the chat box and let me know that you can see and hear okay. All right. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone, whether you're on this live webinar or you might be watching on my YouTube channel, Naturally with Karen. These are free information events, webinars, and videos on YouTube so that you can educate yourself and get the good information that you may be needing right now so that you can help to heal yourself. Tonight's subject is going to be on PCOS. Now, I'm bringing this as a person who's provided guidance for body, mind, and spirit for over 32 years. I've helped people to reverse disease, live healthier and more joyful lives. Now, you might say, what do you mean reversing disease? Well, food is medicine, mind-body components, massage, yoga, and many other aspects are part of the reasons that we got ourselves into our lack of ease or dis-ease. And a good coach, guide, or wellness expert, health practitioner will help you to reverse out of that naturally. We know how to find the right foods as medicine, sometimes the mineral supplementation, cleansing, and different ways for you to be able to reclaim your health instead of just overlaying a drug, instead of just cutting the problem out. Sometimes it's far better not to deal with those ramifications and to be able to reverse the disease. So that's what we're going to be speaking about tonight. I am a thyroid and a mind-body expert, and I have many tools in my medicine bag. And I want to just let you know these are some of the ways that you can connect with me through my website at naturallywithkaren.com, through Twitter, through my Facebook page, Naturally with Karen, and I would love to help you out. That's where we can meet privately and confidentially. The sessions are $75, and we spend time to just very carefully go over your situation, not diagnosing, not asking you to get off any pharmaceutical drugs, but understanding what's going on so I can help you start to reverse some of the smaller symptoms, and then you can work your way through some of the bigger ones. Not everyone is absolutely clear what it means when we give all of these basic descriptions about disease, like what is PCOS? PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it really is broken down to just mean many cysts on a woman's ovaries. Now, on the ovaries are follicles, and those follicles are where you are actually producing the ovum so that you can produce future children. You have all of the eggs, so to speak, you're born with that you will ever have, but they're being ripened and prepared to exit through the fallopian tubes, through the follicles. And so the follicles are being affected both in your thyroid gland, your kidneys, and all of your organs, including your sex organs, your ovaries. So when our ovaries develop cysts, it's a definite sign that our hormones are unbalanced. Now, if you look at these couple of images here, some of the visible PCOS symptoms are A woman starts to get a little more belly fat, some thinning hair. Sometimes there is what is known as a dark spot on the skin, especially around the neck. And this isn't just on women, this is on men too, and young men. Skin tags, more moles, acne and cystic acne, a lot more breast issues, and having rented space in a day spa for many years, I see a lot of women coming in doing the waxing of the facial hair at far, far younger ages than what we used to see, which was women in their 50s and up when they started having a lot of hormonal changes. Some women experience a lot of weight gain. Sometimes there's a lot of, in the general PCOS symptoms, you'll see insomnia, mood swings, rage, fatigue, sugar cravings, anxiety. And you know what? A lot of women consult with me and they say, what am I going to do? I'm married. Maybe they have one young child. This is pretty common. And they're telling me, they're wondering what's going to happen to their marriage because their husband's wondering, why is their sex drive so low? They don't want to be touched. They don't want it. They have such a low libido. Some of the internal symptoms are this pelvic pain and all the way into sleep apnea, because when cysts start to affect our body, it starts to affect us in many very loud and pronounced ways. So you see the picture over here of the young woman, and she's looking at all of the different myriad PCOS symptoms. And a really large one that's very present in the minds of women is the infertility issue that's associated with this. Because if you're not able to produce your ovum through the follicles and they're plugged up with all of the cysts, that's a very frightening thought that perhaps they may be experiencing infertility at a time in the future that they've been waiting to have children. So PCOS is very serious, and there's no mystery as to why we are experiencing PCOS and other gynecological issues. So PCOS, it's not hard to understand, and I really want to make sure that you feel really joyful tonight because neither is reversing it. So you can go to the doctor and you can get an official diagnosis and find out that you have PCOS in the same way that a pregnant woman receives an ultrasound, or a lot of my thyroid clients receive an ultrasound over their thyroid to find out if they have cysts, which turn into nodules. It's the same thing with polycystic ovarian syndrome. We would run and do a sonogram over your ovaries, and we would look to see if they had, anatomical changes. We would look to see if the woman was reporting other symptoms like we just discussed in our previous slide. So much like a lot of the other syndromes that are in the world today, 10 international codes of disease, the ICD is now at volume 10 as we sit here in year 2017. Much like other syndromes, you're going to already know if you're experiencing problems here. But getting an ultrasound is not a bad idea. It's one of the more minimally invasive testings that you can do to see if you're having a problem. So if you look at the images here, you can see a healthy ovary and you can see an ovary that is going to be ejecting eggs, so to speak, into the fallopian tubes where the follicles have been severely compromised. You can see the picture, the image on the right, the normal ovary and the polycystic ovary. This is our body preparing in a very defensive way for what is being onslaught onto the body and the mind, because our thoughts are just as potent as the food messengers. The information that we put into our vehicle, our body, is the thoughts are equally important. So what are the doctors doing? Well, by and large, most of the doctors need to conform to the Western allopathic medical industry. They are employed by hospitals and clinics. They are insured by standardized insurance, and they attend very standardized training through the American Medical Association, the AMA. Now, we love doctors and we respect them, so if you're listening and you are a Western doctor, we love you and respect you, and you are absolutely the best at trauma care, and I realize that you don't always have the absolute freedoms to be able to treat things in the way that sometimes those of us who studied food for as many years as I did, or the minerals, or the way of life, you're not able to do some of the things that we are. And what I'm striving for is that ideal partnership between all of the wonderful tools you have, the knowledge you have that far exceeds my own of anatomy and physiology, and my knowledge of how to reverse, listen to the mind-body issues, and also look at some of the other issues. Together, we make a dynamic team. Doctors are today prescribing synthetic hormones and diabetic medications like metformin. Metformin is one of those medications that was actually starting to become less and less prescribed for diabetes type 2, the more that at least 10 to 15 doctors I am aware of started espousing that diabetes type 2 is completely and quite easily reversed. Doctors are not trained in the ways of the food as medicine, herbs, minerals. They are more so looking at drugs, surgeries, and other options. Why? Not because you're bad people, but because you are working within a system that those are the options that are offered. Taking and overlaying more hormones like the pill, the birth control pill that's been around since at least the 60s, and the prescriptions that are given today are going to cause more harm, as they just help us to ease our pain temporarily, but they do really very little to nothing to actually heal us. There's a difference between treating and healing, and this is what I've spoken about for the last 32 plus years. We can go and heal from the root, or we can just overlay and treat the symptoms and get rid of your pain. Now, if you have a trauma, you have a car accident or a bad burn or something happens to you, you want some pain medication right away. You want someone to go in and do a surgery and alleviate the problem because you've had a trauma. But when you have accumulated symptoms that are from a body, a vehicle that is not getting what it needs to get, then we want to look at reversing instead of just topically treating. So sometimes we run for the quick fix when ultimately it merely treats us and it doesn't really heal us. Now, our glands and PCOS have a real definite commingling when it comes to how did we get here in the first place. Since I work with so many thyroid issues, and thyroid seems to kind of be the buzzword of the day, doesn't it? I mean, thyroid issues, everyone's becoming acutely aware that their thyroid isn't functioning at full steam. They're also becoming aware of thyroid nodules. About 70% of people over the age of 55 have some sort of thyroid nodules, whether they've had them checked or not. And most of the time, they're asymptomatic and they're also benign. They're not going to cause you a problem. Except that when they're left to accumulate and your system becomes a little slower as you age, then it does become a problem. So our thyroid starts to become underfunded with a lack of minerals, and it develops cysts and toxicity. It can no longer give the body, through the thermostat that it is, the circulation every 17 minutes by bathing every cell in your body with the iodine. The adrenals, the adrenal glands, have everything to do with PCOS. In fact, sometimes they have the most to do with PCOS of this holy trinity here of PCOS, because Women today are absolutely exhausted, and for that matter, everyone's exhausted. We're exhausted because we have many generations of people that have grown up eating wheat, dairy, and flesh foods that came from factory farms that contained an inordinate amount of IGF and BGH, hormones that were put in place to help these animals grow exponentially, faster, bigger, and unnaturally. And they're taking a toll on us too. Our pancreas. You'll hear a lot of people speaking that to heal your PCOS, you're going to need to deal with insulin surges and spikes. You're going to need to heal your pancreas. And that's because they're aware that you're stopping at Starbucks and Caribou Coffee and you're getting sugared up coffee drinks to keep you and lift you up. And you're using alcohol and Xanax and other kinds of drugs and sleep aids and sleeping pills at night. And in between, people are just grabbing and go for food. So what I do with my coaching is I end up showing people how easy it is to stock up on a wide variety of colors, put it on a shelf in the sun, or put it in your car, even if you're living in your car, and learn how to eat naturally so that you can be powered up and be more efficient with your energy. Cysts in general have become epidemic, and there is absolutely no mystery as to why. Cysts are causing issues with our hormones, our menstrual cycles and flow, which I like to call our moon cycle, because ideally they came every 28 days. They came just like a lot of our men or our people who went fishing and used a tide system. They looked to see high and low tide. Well, everything is very lunar based. How we sleep, the tides, the fish in the sea, and our menstrual or our moon cycles. So when our menstrual cycle is not going as it should, when it's too scant, too heavy, too many clots, too toxic, doesn't smell very well, is very off-colored, then we know something's wrong. That's another part of learning. Know thyself and heal thyself, the old modem. Skin, cystic acne. I'm seeing grown women all the way up until at least the age of 45 on a regular basis with little patches of cystic acne on their cheeks. That indicates that we've got a larger problem underneath the integumentary system, the skin. I can feel all around the body, especially when people came for massages for 14 years, I was able to palpate these cysts all along the lymph zones. The other aspect is that women typically start having a lot of metabolic issues. Their weight can get very heavy, and they're not even eating very much. And that's because the whole thermostat in general stopped functioning as it should. It wasn't funded by the minerals and by what it needed. We got into a rote and very automatic habit where we just started grabbing this or grabbing that or running through and getting a pizza and baking it at home without consideration to what some of these chemicals in our food system were doing to us. And they shut down the glands and they shut down the organs. And the body's response to that was to produce these cysts, especially with all of the RF and EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, in our homes, in our environments, and everywhere, constantly pulsing signals and Wi-Fi. We have an overproduction of facial hair, which is also known as hirsutism. You see women, like I said before, really getting waxed, electrolysis, doing anything to get rid of the mustache and the facial hair that formerly only came to older women. And lastly, anovulation. Just a fancy word for saying you're no longer ovulating. That egg isn't ejecting itself and flowing into the fallopian tubes. You're starting to not have an ovulatory cycle. So your menstrual cycles are going to be off balance. Hirsutism is the overproduction of male pattern hair growth on a woman's face chest, and her back. You can see from the images here that the facial hair on the side, on the upper back of this young woman, and you see this woman here kind of comedically posing with a razor and some shaving gel or soap. That's just not fun to deal with in a society that really sets a standard about what we look like. A society that seems to be somewhat preoccupied, if not obsessed, with hair removal, making sure that we shave our genitals, that we keep our face hair-free, making sure that our legs are hair-free and our underarms are hair-free. We've become quite preoccupied with making sure that we reduce ourselves of the hair. And consequently, we tend to be losing a lot of hair in the places we want to have it. So what I've witnessed is for the past 14 years in the state of Minnesota, since I left California, I saw a lot of clients, hundreds, maybe 1,000 or more, on my table, and I noticed how cystic they truly were. All along their clavicle, under their arms, on the top of their breast, and around the groin. And as I worked over the tops of their hips, I felt a lot of what you would commonly call, if you've worked with meat and cutting meat in the past, you'd really call it gristle. Now, I've given wellness consultations now for several decades, helping people to reverse disease, and I've reversed my own. In fact, I have a webinar plan for my reversal of advanced ovarian carcinoma, which I will be more on the camera and show you some of the documentation that I received that evidenced that diagnosis. But I know that many people, in fact, maybe I could go so far as to say the majority of people, were truly unaware that the diet they were eating was actually causing these types of problems. So if you look at the image here over to the right, you're going to see that a lot of dairy products are actually triggering you to have allergic reactions and digestive problems. White sugar is causing you to have a lot of those insulin spikes. I have a class that I'm teaching at the Whole Foods in Duluth on May the 9th on raw, vegan, gluten-free cheesecake. Now, if you would have told me about that before I got onto this journey, I would have thought that's got to be really, really awful, or it's got to be extremely hard to make. Now, a regular cheesecake, meaning the mainstream cheesecake, using cream cheese, maybe a graham cracker crust, and the more traditionally used ingredients actually take a lot longer than my raw, vegan, gluten-free cheesecake. And I can use a lot of the things I have handy, some of the fresh lemons I have, limes, maybe a fresh raw little pumpkin. Believe it or not, you can use a fresh little raw pumpkin or squash, and you can get the most nutrients out of the food. So I really enjoy teaching those classes like I will be teaching on May the 9th at Whole Foods, because people see how easy it is. And once they see it, once they take home the recipe and they've had the visual experience, like you can still have using YouTube and some of the great videos available today, you can easily start to transition. All you have to do is start by giving yourself daily habits of love and success. Get up, do your few little chores, be thankful for the day. Notice that you can talk back to that depression. You can say one step. I'll take one step in front of the next. I'll remember that as this webinar that I listened to, maybe you'll share it with several of your friends or family. There isn't anyone that couldn't use this information. The caffeine, I absolutely love the taste of coffee. Nothing better, right? A nice hot mocha. But I learned to make alternatives to that. I learned with products, long ago, like Ticino and some of the coffee substitutes, some of the Dandy blend teas that I use that I also mix into my cheesecakes. Some of these hydrogenated oils, canola oil, vegetable oils, raise the bad cholesterols in your body. And cholesterol is what we use. Very important point here. I want you to write this down if you're taking notes. Cholesterol is what we use to make hormones. So when you go to a doctor and they want to take your cholesterol down, if you're in the 300 range, perhaps you are eating a diet that's a little too high in trans fats and dairy and wheat. But take it down gently this way instead of using, quote, medications, end quote, that are drugs, that are designed to drive down that number to make you feel content when you see that venous blood sample. Okay? Alcohol, I have clients at least once a week that say, well, I really do like to drink my wine, and I really do like a couple of cocktails. I'm not willing to give those up. But alcohol is a real serious liver agitator, and it really worsens the metabolism of sugar. So I would ask you to look at other alternatives. You know, some people are looking into CBD, which is cannabidiol, and it's the aspect of hemp or cannabis. It's THC based, and it goes in and helps you to reduce the anxiety. It gives you a gentle relaxation without a high. The THC CBD would give you a little high. The CBD from the hemp would not give you the high. So a lot of the red meats, hamburger, hot dogs, steaks, are going to affect your hormonal system. So get a good look at the dirty foods that cause PCOS and become acquainted with them so that when you start doing your weekly or your shopping every couple of days, you want to start eating to live and create habits of love and success. Now, someone may get offended by this, and that certainly is not my intent here. What I do is I want to bring this to you with love. We are not cows. We do not imbibe cow udder mucus. The way that cow mammary gland fluid is processed today is absolutely insanity. And everywhere I go to get gas for my car at a convenience store or to run into Walmart and get a pack of toilet paper in the small city I live in or anywhere else, I see people constantly bringing out big plastic endocrine disrupting jugs, meaning hormonal disrupting jugs that have been sitting under fluorescent lights of homogenized and pasteurized cow milk. And if you say milk, people automatically assume 80 to 90% of the time or more that you're talking about cow mammary gland fluid that is meant for a baby that would grow over 100 pounds in its first year of life. Humans do not do that. It is a product. It is not a product that is good for you. Now, perhaps 100 or 150 years ago, when we lived out on the land and we occasionally milked old Bessie out on the land, who was under the sunshine and who was able to feed her own calf, and it was an extra supplement to our diet, and we used some of that cream, I can certainly appreciate that with all due respect. But today, we are taking mammary gland fluid from an animal that has been given gross amounts of growth factor, antibiotics, and inoculation through the water system. It's exposed to a lot of pests, a lot of anxiety and depression, and we are taking something that is a fat substance from an animal, and we are becoming genetically like them. Women will have big, big thighs and buttocks and bodies and big, thick arms and problems that are related to being too big in your skin bag. That produces a smell, a toxic stink, and a stench because it doesn't digest well. This heated mammary gland fluid that has had artificial synthetic vitamins added to it, that's what homogenized and pasteurized mean. So we are becoming more genetically mutated, which has everything to do with our own hormonal problems, and it's causing the production of many cysts throughout the body. In our ovaries, you can see people that have necrotic kidney disease, that have cysts all over their ovaries. We have people that get what's called fatty liver, thyroid nodules, thyroid cysts, and they can affect any of the organs in your body, not just your sex organs, but any of the organs in your body. So we have kind of some funny cartoons down there. You know, I warned you about all the hormones in the meat and dairy that you were eating. You can see the guy with the typical hormone belly. The bowling ball belly is hormone storage. You can look here and see got pus? Well, milk does. Take a look at what is actually in a glass of what you call milk. Okay? And then you can see to the far right the udder and teats of an animal pre and post IGF, the growth factors that are given to these animals to have them exponentially and unnaturally produce a product in the business that is industrial milking. So the first thing to do is ditch the SAD diet, the standard American diet, or the SAD diet. Get rid of the aluminum cans, all the sugar spikes, the caramelized drinks like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Dr. Pepper, which is over-caffeinated, the caffeine, the phosphorus-eating bone material, all of it, the food coloring, and especially the bromide in the Mountain Dew products, and maybe many of the others that we may be unaware of, are actually going to really just exacerbate your conditions and cause you to create more and more cysts. Let's go ahead and ditch the wheat pizza with the toxic sauce and the nasty cheese, which is really pus. Let's ditch the peanuts for a while, all the fried foods, you know, the nasty brown GMO potato French fries, and the nasty clown food over at McDonald's, Wendy's, and Arby's. You can go ahead and ditch those because you know what? They're just clowning you. They're clowning you because they know that they're one system that's sending you right into the next system. Predictably, new consumers are born every single day. Eating a raw or eating a lot of raw food, or even just eating raw by starting your morning with a fresh made juice, that's not too hard. That's a great place to start. Start by grabbing yourself a pineapple, cutting it up into chunks in the blender, and throw in a hand of spinach and blend it up. You'll have a delicious green smoothie. It's that simple. Eating high raw or all raw, vegan and gluten-free foods will heal you. If I had not seen this starting around 1985, training with Pamela Masters in Los Gatos, California. I'm a California native of 42 years, and I paid for her class, and it absolutely opened my mind watching someone who at that time was 50 years old who had reversed cancer when I was in my early 20s. Now I'm in my 50s, and for all these decades, I have brought that, my herbalist education, plant-based nutrition, yoga, massage, mind-body expertise, and years and years and years, over 32 years, of daily research to understand not only how the medical system views things, but also how I view things through a simple template. So learn to eat all the colors. If oranges are on sale at Whole Foods for a bag for $3.99, bring home your oranges or your tangerines. Grab a couple pomegranates. Grab a beet or two. Get those blood cleaners in. The red foods are your blood cleaners, especially your watermelon, which is full of glutathione. So try, if you are very full of starches, even though we're contradicting ourselves a little bit in this webinar, not to eat starches, we'll eat starches, right? Stay away from some of the starches like white and brown rices and brown potatoes, cassava, which is very popular for all my family over in Africa, except that one of the rices that is not a pure starch is your wild rice, because it's technically really not a rice at all. Eat lots of greens. Greens are going to give you calcium. Greens are going to give you chlorophyll. If you take a dog and they have an upset stomach, whether it's parasites, digestive issues, stress in the home, one of the first things they're going to do before my dogs get in the car to go to the dog park or go hit the trail is they're going to grab a couple of bites of grass. Why? They know that the green of the chlorophyll that is obtained from the solar infusion of the sun is going to heal them. It's going to move what needs to move along in their digestive tract. So you're going to shrink your cyst, diminish your symptoms, and you're going to power up. And just look at this raw pizza. You might look at that and say, that looks way too hard for me to make. But I'm telling you that with the advent of Google and YouTube and search engines that have been with us for a while now, you can use a fresh raw cauliflower, put it in the food processor with a little nutritional yeast, a sprinkle of iodized salt, a little bit of water. You've got yourself a delicious crust that you can dehydrate in your oven or your dehydrator. You can put a hummus, a salsa, or whatever kind of a sauce, a vegan aioli. Wildwood makes an ideal one. And cut up some fresh things and put them on the top. Olives, pineapple, mushrooms. And just learn that it does feel different to eat and live this way, but you won't have many of the symptoms that you usually have. I absolutely adore food as medicine. And sometimes what I want to do is let people know that the progesterone is what they're missing because they've had estrogen and they've had androgen dominance for too long. Females are eating and grew up eating for maybe the first 18 or more years of their life factory farmed animals that were given a variety of hormones, often indiscriminately, because the farmer wanted to experiment and get his herd or his flock as big and as fast as possible. So these chemicals have greatly affected us. They've manipulated our own hormones, along with the Wi-Fi, living in the electromagnetic frequencies, the EMFs, living with stress, more mental stress today than ever, and eating a poor diet. Let's face it, the majority of the people that I speak with, they're not eating much in the way of raw food. It's coffee in the morning, a couple glasses of wine at night, and maybe one banana in terms of fresh food for the majority of the day. And often when I'm doing consultations, I find out that people were just grabbing a banana from their grocery store when they went shopping, unaware that that banana, if it is not organic, likely was gassed on a truck on the way to their home. So try to eat your food as clean sourced as possible. And when it comes to progesterone, that's what helps us have that ovulation cycle. That's what helps us to balance. Progesterone and estrogen need to be very balanced in the body in order to run your menstrual cycle, in order to fund your moods, in order for you to be able to feel calm. So you'll find that in the stores there are progesterone topical creams that you can rub on the inside of your arm. Bioidentical or BHRT. I've used the estradiol, the progesterone, and other bioidentical hormone replacement therapies. But progesterone, when used for a short while, will usually bring your moon cycle or your periods back into balance. Some of the foods that have more progesterone making ability than others are your collard greens, your pumpkin, like I was just speaking about the delicious raw pumpkin pie that I make, or pumpkin cheesecake, the watermelon, which a lot of people found, this must not have much nutrients in it. It's pretty watery, but watermelon has a lot of glutathione that helps to boost your liver function. Watermelon also helps you to make progesterone. So it's a dynamic food. Big if here, guys, if the watermelon is seeded. We've got to go into our grocers, into our produce people and say, we want our watermelon to have seeds. That means we want our food supply to be more original, or heirloom as it's called. Squash. How many people do I speak with on a regular basis that they actually do not prepare squash? Now you can prepare your squash using a spaghetti, and you can spiral slice it raw and make a spaghetti out of it. You can lightly bake it by cutting it in half and putting it face down on a cookie sheet. When it's done and it's cooled off, put on a little coconut oil, a little maple syrup, sweeten it up a little bit if you'd like to. You can scrape it out as in the spaghetti squash and make yourself a nice warm meal with a little marinara sauce. You can also do the almonds, which I did for many, many years. Each time I made a smoothie, I put a handful of raw almonds. You can start with a cup of blackstrap molasses in the morning, a good quality, especially if you're deficient in iron. Now, I hear people on a regular basis say, I just can't eat like that. And it's not true. Trust me, I have heard all of the excuses. If you look down here on the lower left, you're going to see where someone has made a stackable, whether you call it a lasagna, and in the background you're going to see some zucchini wraps. That's where they've taken a slicer like my Titan slicers, which are 2 for $20, and they've sliced the zucchini and they've placed different vegetables in between the lasagna. This is a vegan and raw chocolate truffle. And also in the plate, we've got a delicious salad with a green smoothie. So how do we power up our glands and then increase our ability to reduce the symptoms of and reverse PCOS? And this is right next to some really delicious looking collard rolls to the right. Collard is such a magnificent, nutrient-dense food. And when you first look at them and start working with them, you're going to say to yourself, whoa, they're way too hard to roll up into something. So you can put them on your cutting board. I'll give you a little tip from someone who's been doing this for a very long time. You can either slightly dip them in some very hot water and then take your hands and soften them a little bit. Or you can put them on a large cutting board, food preparation board, and you can roll your rolling pin over them or another something that's kind of like a rolling pin and just soften them up a little bit. You can also take a knife and go down the spine. And if the spine is big and really brittle and too hard to masticate, too hard to chew, you can just take your knife and cut out the spine and you use 1/2 of a very large collard leaf and roll up your roll that way. Okay? Roll up some quinoa with some fresh avocado, some roasted red bell peppers, a couple of raw macadamia nuts, and slice a raw Brazil nut for that selenium. You've got yourself a rockin' wrap. An amazing roll, if nothing else. Stick a little toothpick in there, take them with you to go in your container, and you've got a great lunch. So how do we power up our glands and then increase our ability, as we said, to reduce the symptoms and reverse PCOS? Reduce your mucus intake and your congestion. Get off the dairy, transition over to some of your nuts and seed milks, nut and seed cheeses. I mean, it's just endless. There's such great information out here. Detoxification. First, you want to look at your digestive detox, simplifying your food rhythm, simplifying your habits. Get into a regular morning consistent habit. Wake up, give thanks for the day, sit down quietly for a few minutes and remember your dreams. Get up, open up your blinds or your curtains. Try to start waking up more and more so with the rising sun. And then look at detoxifying your colon so that, all of your excrement is able to exit easily. And then you go into more of your specific organ cleanses, like your liver, your kidney, your parasite cleanses. Your mineral supplementation, magnesium is an absolute must. It's going to be an absolute godsend friend for you, especially with PCOS, is to make sure you've got your magnesium up, whether it's internal or the magnesium oil topically. Selenium, like I mentioned with your Brazil nuts, also a little bit with your cacao, your iodine. Copper, it is ideal to work with a coach and find out if you are copper excess or copper deficient. Copper, we need such a very small amount of copper, but it's really critical for your mental stability. Zinc is amazing, and it will really help you to clean up your liver and clean up your function. So if we're going to reduce symptoms and reverse PCOS, we also want to make sure that we're getting in some exercise. Walking, yoga, or Tai Chi, something gentle but very effective. It doesn't have to be that, you're doing something extremely hardcore. Sometimes that's the worst thing you can do when your body needs the opportunity for more rest to let these cysts out. It needs to know that your skin, digestion, and your elimination channels are working well so that you can release out this cystic material. What's that going to look like? When you release it out, it's going to look like mucus on your stool. It's going to look like pimples and rashes coming out on your skin until you detoxify yourself. So the sauna is also another great tool. The infrared sauna, getting out in the warm sun if you live somewhere where you have great solar infusion on your vehicle. Reflexology. One of the things I absolutely love when I've got a little extra money is to go in and get a half-hour or an hour foot massage. I mean, you are getting stimulation to your organs that is absolutely phenomenal. You're moving the stagnation and the congestion through the body by using the feet, whether you're out walking barefoot or on some real bendable shoes, or you're getting a nice foot massage. That's one thing you can go and do on a Friday or a Saturday night or a Saturday morning with a friend that's a lot better than going and getting your nails painted or having the chemicals take the paint back off of your nails, is to spend that money on a massage. A full body massage where you'd move the lymph and help the body to clear toxins and also increase your endorphins, or even just a foot reflexology massage where you sit with a friend and you get a reflexology massage side by side. Lastly, to power yourself up, you want to look at reducing and eventually eliminating pharmaceuticals and vaccines. Now, I know this has always been a really touchy subject, and a lot of people are very attached to this vaccine mentality. And theoretically, vaccines are absolutely wonderful. However, practically, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the adjuvants and the propellants, including the peanut-based products, Rhesus monkey tissue, aluminum, thimerosal, which is a mercury derivative, and all of the other caustic, carcinogen, and heinous chemicals that are added to these vaccines have done little more but expose us to virulent viruses and diseases which are now brewing inside of us. So we're getting very little benefit or ROI, return on our investment, of injecting these chemicals into our bodies, particularly if you consider injecting them into a young infant, toddler, or child, or an older person for shingles or pneumonia or the flu. I just absolutely cannot do them for myself, and that is a choice I'm going to make for me. You can educate yourself and make a choice for you as well. Do you know about maca? M-A-C-A, maca, or some people call it maca root. And we have a newer form, which is gelatinized, that I have in bold here. So there's a lot of maca root on the market. It tends to come out of Peru, South America. You can see the images of what it looks like, and it's often dried in the sun. And it is processed in a bin where the dried root itself is brought into the state of a powder. The gelatinized maca root is easier for people to digest because they basically, for all intents and purposes, have removed a good amount of the starch. So now the starch is not binding your digestion because it was a high starch. It's a root like cassava, like many of the other starches. And those starches are fine for you if you're not full of cysts. But if you have lack of ease, or what the medical community calls dis-ease, then starches are not a good idea. If you're blocked up, your thyroid's got nodules, your ovaries have cysts, your kidneys have cysts, you've got a fatty liver, your gallbladder's barely chugging along with gallstones, which are what? Cysts that became hardened, then chances are you want to really, really steer clear of starch. So the gelatinized maca root, which you can buy by the pound in a bag and have it shipped to your door or at your natural food store, has got a slight earthy taste to it. So it's really delicious if you want to add it. Add a big heaping tablespoon. Sometimes I add a little more because I have acclimated to using maca root. And I add it to my smoothie, little almond or coconut milk, handful of almonds, big tablespoon of maca root, gelatinized maca root, couple of frozen organic bananas, a little bit of cacao powder. You've got a delicious smoothie that's very, very food as medicine. And what does maca root do? Maca root is going to help you to balance your hormones. And guess what? It's an amazing progesterone tonic. It helps you to make more progesterone. So all you have to do is buy a pound of the powder or go in on a larger quantity with some of your friends and add the maca root powder to your smoothie. Once you've got your cooked cereal in the bowl and you're waiting for it to cool off, your oatmeal, your rice, or your teff porridge, or whatever it is that you like to have, you can stir it in when it's off the stove and in your bowl so you're not cooking the heck out of it and ruining it. And you can stir it in. It'll give you a nice earthy flavor. Throw in a little coconut palm sugar, a little bit of ginger powder, whatever you want to do, and start making that food really divine medicine. Naturally clearing PCOS means that we want to really rely on nature. So when you're walking out in nature, you pick up electrons. You also stimulate the reflex points on the bottom of your feet, provided that you don't have high heels or really hard-soled shoes. So be practical and be natural. Either try to go out barefoot and step on the grass once a day for a couple of minutes and pull up those electrons from the earth that the earth is giving us, or wear a flexible shoe. The toxic heat, as it's called in Chinese medicine, or toxins in your body, is actually a bit of a catalyst. So if you start breaking out with more acne and rashes, sometimes it has a lot to do with you removing congestion issues and circulating them. They're going to need to leave the body through the skin, the urine, the feces, the earwax, the crusties in the eye, the sleepy eye. Those are all your body allowing you to get rid of things. Doctors call these glandular issues. I have a number of clients that came in that were diagnosed with a glandular issue, but actually what was really going on is it was their diet and they were full of cysts. Because what's really happening is that you don't have the food that you need to fund your vehicle. So what I really want you to do is, for 32 years, this has been a really hard pill to swallow. Please never mind all the protein rhetoric and the calcium jargon. Do we need these things? Absolutely we do. But get your homework done about taking more and more of hormones and drugs and treating yourself, and learn how to get off of them. What do I mean by that? People wanted to sell you dead animals. They wanted to sell you factory farmed animals. There was a lot of land in America. Animals were an easy commodity, unfortunate for them, and they were sold as meat. I'm not saying meat's entirely bad. I know a lot of people enjoy eating meat because it's familiar and they're not going to give it up, and I'll be the last one to put you down or make you feel bad for it. I have family members that love eating meat. They really do. But I ask them to go get the grass-fed, if they can, right? If you can, go get the grass-fed that's not hormone and antibiotic induced animals that probably were also more humanely kept and treated, and do that instead. The protein rhetoric, every single person that comes in for a wellness or is virtually on a wellness session with me through Skype all over the world is deeply concerned about where they're going to get their protein, because since I was a little girl in the early 60s, that was the dominant propaganda. What about your protein and your calcium? That's what moved the meat and the milk industry. That's what got people completely dependent on it, was that paradigm that was positioned into your mind just like any other virus. I want to ask you, find a coach like myself or someone else who has a lot of experience, in my case, decades of experience reversing and helping you to get through this. You can do it, but you can do it a lot easier, faster, and stay on track when you have someone that's not going to badger you, but you have someone that's excited and they're asking you what's positive, what's going on, and giving you new things to try and helping you to reverse each symptom one by one so that you can get to your goal a lot faster. No different than you'd go to a college to ascertain a degree so that you could go out into the job market and find your goal faster. And let me just say this. If you've already got endometriosis, if you were formerly diagnosed with endometriosis, which is retrograde menses, you definitely have PCOS. They go hand in hand. It might not be documented, and you might not have even felt it, but both of these will take you straight into problems which by and large are going to be infertility. Our final thoughts. I want you to feel free to contact me through my inbox, through my website at naturallywithkaren.com. Text me, set up a consultation. They're only $75 for private, confidential sessions where I can help you in many ways, not just with PCOS, with anything, because all disease has at its root that we became wound in the wrong direction of body, mind, and spirit. I'm going to open this up to questions and answers. I ran a little over in terms of giving content. Hopefully that'll work out for everyone and for the YouTube listeners, that they get a good amount of content here. I've had really tremendous experience with helping people to reverse PCOS, and I've had phenomenal experience with some of my very deep insights helping people to reverse infertility. So I see one question here, and that is, what about the birth control pill? And that particular question is really interesting because, like I said, from the 1960s, a lot of people were taking the birth control pill strictly as a contraceptive, to be able to trick the body, and I really want to emphasize that word, trick the body into not having a monthly menstrual cycle and believing that the body was indeed pregnant when it was not. And there's a really heavy price that comes along with that, because a woman's monthly cycle is for her cleansing benefit, to shed that endometrium layer in her uterus, to shed any toxins that have come into her uterus, into her vagina sexually, because her vagina is a self-cleaning unit. We don't need douches and all these products that we insert inside of ourselves. We might have had years where we used tampons that were full of ingredients that caused women to suffer from issues like toxic shock syndrome, TSS, where women ended up in hospitals, blacking out. But the birth control pill is derived from animal estrogen or synthetic chemically made estrogen. And it really puts a woman into an estrogen dominant state, which is one of the number one reasons that we end up with breast, uterine, and ovarian cancers is an estrogen dominant state. So we want to be very careful with that. So the birth control pill is not a good remedy for PCOS. What it does is it temporarily staves off the symptoms that your body is giving you as a warning. And so what's going to happen is you're going to end up having a surgery. Okay. Yes, I see another question here, and that has to do with hysterectomies. And we have women undergoing hysterectomies at an alarming rate. The root of hysterectomy is histose. And some of this comes from the fact that women were viewed to be hysterical beings, that women were too emotional historically. So there were many, many different modes of treating the womb, and hysterectomy was one such way, where we just went in and started cutting the problems out. Now, this originated with women that were brought into America during the time of the Middle Passage, during the times of slavery, where women were experimented upon by one particular gynecologist who was removing what was called a fistula, which was a growth, an abnormal growth in the uterine walls. Very inhumane, very insensitive, and men leading a gynecological profession, probably not the best idea all the way around. So what we have today is we see that we have a real overt, overkill way of treating a woman's womb. If a woman is given some of the proper care and nutrients and minerals, many of these issues will simply go away. That is not charlatan. That is not oversimplification. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes for many, many, many years, I wouldn't believe it myself. Okay, another question about yoni steams. Yoni steams, are starting to pop up all over the United States and maybe all over the world. And this is, a wonderful business for women that can be done with other women. And a stool with a large bucket or like a heated rice cooker, which is something I used when I gave Panchakarma Ayurvedic treatments many years ago, with a couple of big tea balls or loose herbs in the steaming water, is placed underneath the chair, and the woman with a dress or with an apron around her sits on the chair and places some blankets over the top of her and sips on maybe some womb tea and has her yoni steamed. Her yoni is another word for the womb, which incorporates the vagina, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the cervix, the entire pelvic region. And yoni steams are very beneficial because not only do they treat on a physical level, but they're also treating the emotional, mental, psychic, and the spiritual level. Especially if you're sitting in a room with 3 or 4 other women doing a yoni steam and relaxing and sipping your tea, really focusing on your womb of creation. Yoni steams would be a wonderful adjunct therapy to the food as medicine, the minerals, and all of the other components, aspects, and dimensions of reversing symptoms and entirely reversing all that is PCOS. Okay, we have another question about essential oils. And I've been using essential oils for over 20 years myself. I really love them. I use them every single day of my life. And I've got a big shelf in my bathroom with, probably 20, 30 or more different essential oils. Most of them are in little small bottles. Some of them have a diffuser cap where you can drop just a drop at a time. And some of them are a little bit thicker, and they've got like a little kind of a piece on them, so you can just kind of put the essential oil that's thicker onto your skin. It is a good recommendation that you dilute them so that you put them into some sort of a carrier oil, jojoba oil, sesame, almond, olive, whatever the case may be for you. And you can use them on the skin. You can also use them right on the site of your pelvis topically by putting them right over where the ovaries, you would assume that they would be. Lavender would be really good for relaxation. Peppermint is really good for cooling if you have a lot of cystic acne breaking out. Eucalyptus. There's a whole collection of essential oils that you just really cannot go wrong. And one of them that I just naturally gravitate to for PCOS is Lang Lang. And that is spelled Y as in yellow, L as in Larry, A-N-G as in George, Lang Lang. and that is a flower. It smells divinely feminine. It is absolutely beautiful. It reminds you of spring and summer. And that is something that I would use with a little bit of sweet almond oil, and I would rub around my pelvic region. Now I'm going to make one last comment before we end here, so we can end just about on time or just a little bit over. And that is that massages by your partner in the pelvic region are especially good. A lot of people, when they start cleansing, they will actually feel external cysts manifest on the sides of the groin. I had a lovely client come in this week to my shop just yesterday, and she was talking about how she had gone out of state to visit someone, and she was making her juice there in the morning and drinking it with the food-based vitamin C that I always recommend, and that her friend, when they went out for long walks, had some cysts pop up in between the groin there, and they were very painful for over a week. You know, what happened? Did something go wrong? And that is where the body is so relieved to get nutrients that the cysts are going to pop out and they're going to make themselves a little bit more pronounced, because that's a part of the healing journey. So sometimes you will experience that when you first start to heal. It almost looks like you're kind of going backwards, just like right now as we do this particular webinar, we're in a planetary retrograde. So I think that's it for all the questions. And PCOS is something that I really enjoy. I love helping people to reverse it, because it's a really joyful thing for women to feel as though they can kind of have a little more peace of mind when it comes to their fertility. You know, women are dreaming about having children, but maybe not just right now. Maybe they and their partners are thinking that they might want to wait a few years, get done with college or medical school, as is the case with one of my clients. And she knew that with a PCOS diagnosis and going through medical school that was very, very stressful, that she needed to get a handle on it. And here she was going to be a Western allopathic doctor, but she'd heard that I was going to be able to help her on a different level than a Western medical doctor. So instead of taking the hormones, that's why we called this pharmaceutical scam, is because you're not going to heal PCOS taking the synthetic hormones. Not really. You're not going to get to the root causes. You're not really going to heal PCOS taking metformin for sure, which is a diabetic medication. That is a pharmaceutical scam. Those are not going to heal you. They may temporarily make you feel better, like a synthetic thyroid hormone, but they won't heal you. What I've given you in the slide presentation, and what I can work with you individually, because different people have different manifestations that we want to be able to hit more quickly and help for lots of reasons, especially if you're trying to hold down a job and you're fatigued all the time. Best to invest in yourself and get on it right away with someone's really holding your hand through this. So I'm going to end for now. I want to thank anyone who's taken the time to listen and journey into the work that I do. And I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. Good night.